Hey everyone, today I had an interview with Koehrsen, who's a top data science writer on our Medium publication Towards Data Science. The reason I wanted to interview him today is because he wrote an interesting article about what he learned from writing a data science article every week for a year. I thought it was really informative, so I wanted to ask him about that. In this interview, we talked about things like how he learned data science in the first place, and how he started sharing his knowledge on Medium, and how that led to him getting 2 data science jobs. So I hope you enjoy. So first of all, could you introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, I'm Will Koehrsen, and I'm currently a data scientist at a small startup called Cortex Building Intelligence. And we help buildings save energy by giving the building engineers recommendations for how they can operate their building more efficiently. And so we use a lot of data science, a lot of time series data, and we give recommendations like what time should you start your building heating in the morning so that it's comfortable for tenants when they come in, but also that you don't start it too early so you aren't using more electricity than you should. So we're kind of helping buildings. We help the buildings to save energy. We lower the operating costs, and then on the other hand, we're lowering the building's carbon footprint, which is good on the sustainability side. So it's kind of this situation where companies can be more green, but then they can also, help their bottom line, which I think is kind of cool.
Nice. And what kind of data science do you usually use? Is it machine learning or data visualization or something else?
So we do a little bit of everything. My job is primarily on the machine learning side. So I basically am in charge of the whole machine learning system. So I'll take an idea from, all the way from a concept to like a system running in production. So that means like I will design the algorithm, or I'll design the system, then write the code, do all the testing, and then put the system into production, and then monitor the system to make sure that everything is going right. So, kind of at a small startup, I have to do like everything along that line. So I'm not sure if that's like typical in the data science field, or if you'd have more specialists. One who's specializing on like designing the model, and another one who puts it into production. But here I do it all. So it's kind of fun. You get to see every step of the pipeline.
Right. And is it mostly Python that you're using?
Yeah. So everything data science, we use Python. Our back end is just SQL, just Postgres. So pretty standard tooling. You don't really need anything fancy. So yeah.
Right. So it's like a Python Django server or Flask server or something.
We actually deploy through Heroku.
Oh, nice.
So they are cloud provider. So we have an app, and we're currently working on Dockerizing it, and then we deploy that on Heroku, and Heroku just runs it for us. We don't really have to worry about any of the details like provisioning EC2 instances or anything. That's kind of all handled for us. So that's nice.
Nice. So one thing I remember reading in your article is that you found a way to make your job more enjoyable, or like you're driven by curiosity, and by applying the same principle to work, it becomes more enjoyable.
Yeah, I would say so. Like, I think it's really like data science is this really powerful field where you can take a lot of numbers that might be meaningless in a spreadsheet, and then you can do some analysis and make some graphs or produce predictions, that actually have an impact in the real world. Like they're changing how people act, and maybe that's for the best. And so I think that to me is like really motivating by itself. And it's also fun in a way because a lot of times in data science, you get like the immediate feedback and like an immediate reward. Like, if you make a nice graph and then you see it pop up instantly on your screen, that's you get a little burst of, I guess what it is, dopamine. So for me, it's kind of similar to like, I don't know, I guess like, playing a video game. Like I don't play video games, but like instead I do data science, which, it guess it scratches that same itch. Yeah, really just like being intrinsically interested in the data that you're working with it helps make the job a lot more enjoyable. And I think that can apply to the projects as well. Like choose data sets that are relevant to your own life, or that solve a problem in the real world. And then that's a lot more motivating than using like, I don't know, this data set, like the iris data set or something that really doesn't have any relevance to you.
Yeah. How do you usually find those data sets?
Usually I'm trying to solve a specific problem. So then I just go out to get that data set. Let's say I want to work on like weather forecasting, then, I search for weather data sets, and the NOAA has, great free public data sets. So I'm like, when I do projects, especially now, I'm more focused on like solving a problem as opposed to using a specific tool. And I see a lot of people who just like want to use the newest tool or whatever. And so they're trying to just find like whatever data set they can. But I like to approach it from the other side and say, okay, here's my problem. Let's go get data. And then I'll use whatever tool is best. Like, I guess I'm thinking more about the why of why I'm like doing this problem as opposed to like how, like what tool am I going to use?
Right. It's like a top-down approach, I guess.
Yeah. Because I'm like more motivated, I guess, by like, solving this problem because it's something that, people will actually use as opposed to just learning a new tool. But I think that's important as well. Like when you're starting out, you should probably use simple data sets because they're easier.
Right. Can you give me an example of like one of those projects?
Yeah, I think one of the earliest ones I did was on building a random forest to predict like the next day's temperature. And so again, that was just using some simple weather data. And then, I basically like cleaned the data and got it into the right format, and then trained a model and made predictions and looked at the accuracy and so on. I think that was a pretty simple project, but I mean, it actually ended up being similar to what I do at work now. And then also for that project, I kind of did like a conceptual explanation of the random forest because at the time I was trying to like learn how does this algorithm actually work. And so I was trying to study the theory and then also the use at the same time. Like I think starting out with a theory a lot of times is kind of difficult because you don't have any like context for how is this algorithm going to be used. So my approach with that project was like, I'm going to use the algorithm, on some data. And then after I use the algorithm, see like, okay, this is what I can get really accurate predictions. And then I went back to the theory and was like studying the theory so I could see how does this work? Like, okay, so now there's these hyperparameters I can tune to maybe make the algorithm better. And so then that was another thing I tried in the code. And then I wrote an article on that. And like my motivation for writing the articles is really as a way for me to make sure that I understand the concept, because if you can't explain a concept clearly through writing or talking, then that means that you probably don't understand it well enough yourself. So that like, if I'm going to be putting something out there in an article, then I want to make sure that I know what I'm talking about. And so that really drove me, to study more and make sure I could understand this algorithm and then explain it to others.
Nice. So I guess you get the ideas for the articles from like the problems that you're trying to solve yourself then.
Yeah, for the most part. I kind of didn't exactly have like a structured method for finding new projects. It was kind of just things that came up in my daily life or at school. You know, if I was doing a school project, I would try to write an article about that as well. Or if I was like reading through a textbook or something and they had, you know, some problems at the end of the chapter, and then, you know, they had a solution, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to like take that solution and then build on top of it and maybe actually use real world data instead of using this simple data set that they did in the textbook. So yeah, they came from a lot of different places, but just the biggest thing was that I found that they were all like relevant to me and I was interested in them, which, you know, that's really what kept me going on those, was that I was enjoying it at the same time as I was learning. So that was really an efficient method for learning.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I remember you mentioning that you spent like 20 hours a week writing articles. And
Yeah, it was quite a big time investment. At the time, I was a full-time student, um, so you know that was taking up a lot of my time. But then I was just like really driven to do these data science projects. So I don't really consider it like, you know, 20 more hours of like working. It was like almost like leisure time, like replacing video games and television with data science. And, you know, I'm sure everyone has some extra hours in their week, you know, that they could probably like, you know, if you could, you know, it was like taking leisure time and making it into data science time, which was learning. It was like learning and enjoyable. Um, so yeah, so I didn't really see it as like, oh, I'm sacrificing all of my free time to do data science.
I see. Yeah, I mean, that became your job, so that's perfect for you then.
Yeah, and it ended up working out. So yeah, that was nice.
Yeah. And did you get that job through your articles?
Uh, yeah, so I've gotten two jobs with the help of my articles, not solely through them. But the first one was, let's see, back in 2018, I was working as an intern, data analyst intern at a large aerospace company. And that wasn't going too well. And then I got a message on LinkedIn from the CEO of a company called Feature Labs, and he had read one of my articles on towards data science. And he said, "Okay, we're kind of, you know, we saw your article. We think you have some skills that might be useful at our startup. Did you want to do this project for us and then come and present it?" So they gave me like a basically a take-home project to do, and then I came into their offices and presented it, and they were like, "Okay, you do really have these skills." And then, you know, they hired me, and I left the internship. And at the time, I was in like a master's program at my school for like data science. But I said, you know what? I think right now I want to get the like in, you know, experience in industry rather than continuing on in that master's program. So I left my internship and went to that startup to work full time. I ended up working there for a couple months, and then I was looking for other positions, and I saw this position where I currently am at Cortex, and it said we're looking for a data scientist with 5 to 10 years of experience. And I sent an email and said, you know, I only have like 6 months of experience, but I've done all these projects on my blog if you want to go check them out. And so then they checked them out and they were like, okay, maybe you do have some skills. And so again, they gave me a take home project to do that I did and then presented it to them. And then they said, okay, you can do what we need you to do, even though you don't have, you know, 5 to 10 years of experience. So, you know, we're just going to hire you. And so I've been at Cortex ever since. I think like the lesson to draw there is that these these blogs are like personal side projects can kind of get you in the door, sort of like in other fields, like, you know, your college degree gets you in the door. It's like this mark of that you've achieved something. And for me, my blog was like that, you know, because I didn't have a degree in data science. I only had I have an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering, but that's not really relevant. And one thing I found was interesting was that neither of these startups ever asked me, do you have a college degree and like what is your degree? They were basically focused on what I could do. And so I thought that was really nice. Like, I think a lot of places are kind of like biased towards, okay, we're only going to hire college graduates, instead of actually assessing the skills that people need for the job.
Yeah. All right, let me see what other questions I have here. Right. So you mentioned that, in the article too, that you self-learned almost everything.
Yeah. So at the time I really started writing and learning about data science, I was a junior in college studying mechanical engineering, and I decided I wanted to make the switch into data science. And I saw that I wasn't going to get the sort of education I wanted from my college. And it was also too late to switch my major. So I decided I was just going to self-learn, because I saw all these resources online. I was like, okay, do I really need to go to like a formal university to study data science, statistics, computer science? And the answer was no. So I found like Udacity. I took the data analyst nano degree and a machine learning nano degree. I did some stuff on Coursera, stuff like Fast AI. Also just like reading textbooks, basically anything I could get my hands on. And what I found in the courses, especially Udacity, was that they were very focused on the skills you need in industry, which was nice because like I did take some data science courses in college, and they were all theoretical, and I would say that they didn't prepare me at all for the data science like in industry. But then these Udacity courses were really focused on we want to get you learning what you're going to need in industry, and so those were really enjoyable. And I also did pay for those, which I think there's something to be said for paying for these online courses, and that it serves as a little bit extra bit of motivation, because I know sometimes it can be hard to finish an online course that you're studying on your own. So that was good. This is not a advertisement for Udacity. I just thought that I got a lot out of that program. And yeah, I really think that you still can learn everything you need for data science online. I like to contrast it with like my mechanical engineering education, where if you saw a paper, it would take you like 3 years and several $1 million to recreate that paper if you wanted to. Whereas in data science, you see a paper, you might be able to go to like GitHub and get their code and like get their data, and like you could be running the experiment from that paper like the same day, and we have access to all these different things that like cloud computing, and so it's a really exciting, like it's an exciting time to be learning in the field, because you can implement a cutting edge algorithm today if you want to, and you don't need these huge resources that can only be provided in a university setting.
Yeah. Do you read a lot of papers then?
I used to. Now I kind of don't have as much time with working. I read papers, I read books. I will give one book recommendation that I really like is Hands-on Machine Learning with Scikit-learn and TensorFlow, by Aurélien Giron. I hope I didn't get that too badly. But that's one that I really found useful, because it took this hands-on approach to teaching. So it was like, okay, we're going to have you implement these algorithms, and then we'll come back to the theory, which was, that's I think a more efficient way to learn than starting with the theory and then moving to applications. Yeah, I haven't been staying up to date on papers that recently. I mean, there's too many, too many at this point. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you mentioning that you like a top-down approach more than starting from the theory.
Yeah, I do. So like, okay, build out a solution, even though if you don't really understand what's going on in the code, just see how this works, and then you can make your way down into the details, and the details are helpful for like, hyperparameter tuning. Maybe you want to write your own algorithm, then the details are important. But, if you just have, if you want to predict, you have like an energy data set, you want to predict how much energy a building is going to use next week. You can just use scikit-learn, see how those predictions come out, see that your model is really accurate. And then that like, okay, this is going to solve my problem. Maybe I should learn how this works. And I think the top-down approach was what's taken by Fast AI. Those are like those are courses on deep learning, and they take a really top-down approach where they show you, here's the problem you can solve, and then later they get into the details. So that's kind of just my learning style. And maybe there are some people who learn better, like starting from theory or starting from the fundamentals and working your way up. But I just find that is a little bit, it can be boring and tedious. And especially with something like computer programming, like if you start at the very basics with like, here's a string and here's a for loop, just by itself, those topics aren't very interesting. But if you use like, okay, here's this function, and we're just going to call the function, not worry about what's going on inside, and like it does so and so, it loads our data or whatever, and then then you can see from like the top down, and then you can get into the details, and then you have like a context for, okay, how is this useful? Like by studying this string, now I understand why we use strings or why we use dictionaries. So I find it very helpful, the top-down approach in data science, in computer programming. It just makes it a lot more, it helps keep you engaged more than, starting from the details and then working to the applications.
Yeah. So you learned coding the same way then?
Yeah, I was taught a little bit of MATLAB and R in college, which I would recommend just absolutely staying away from MATLAB. R was pretty nice, but that's not what I've used in my professional career. So I had to learn Python all on my own. And when I approached learning Python, I tried to do it, like 3 or 4 times before. And I never was really able to get into it because I was taking this approach where I was like learning data structures, learning for loops. It was just super, super boring. And then when I started to learn data science and saw that I would have to learn, a computer language like Python, I set out to learn Python for data science. So it wasn't just learning Python by itself, it was learning it for a specific application. And so I think that, that helps keep you motivated, because you're like, okay, eventually I want to get to the point where I can write machine learning algorithms in Python. That's why I'm studying Python. And so whenever someone says, I want to learn this language, I say, okay, but what do you want to learn the language for? Do you want to learn the language for web development? Do you want to learn the language for, data engineering or data science? So I think it's a lot more, it's important to have like the why, why are you learning this language, as opposed just to going out and doing it, which can be really, really tough.
Yeah. So this next question is sort of a little bit unrelated, but I noticed that you seem to read a lot of articles and books in general, not just data science related. So how do you discover them?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So I like do reading for like work related things, data science, and then I also do reading for enjoyment. And I guess what I do for like the reading for work is still, most of it's still enjoyable, like some like technical data science books and stuff. And there I used to take this like really exploratory approach. I just wanted to read about like every different topic in data science. But once I started getting into industry and seeing like, okay, this is my role, I started to like narrow in on a few going deeper on some topics. So like, I guess like switching from exploring to exploiting, in terms of like data science reading. And then reading for enjoyment, I just like read all over the place. I just find like there's a lot of different topics that are interesting, and most of that's nonfiction. Uh, Particularly, a lot of it is in like psychology and behavioral economics. So like understanding why people make decisions, what kind of biases people have, um, and I do find that helpful in my job, because a lot of data science is convincing people to use your predictions once you've made them, because you can have like the best algorithm in the world, but if no one takes action based on your predictions, then like, well, is your algorithm really doing anything? Um, so on the personal side, um, just try to read widely. I find books all over the place. This would be like if a book is mentioned in another book, or if like I look at like the bibliographies of the books that I read to find new books, and then recommendations for friends, recommendations on the internet. I go to the library a lot, so if a book happens to be featured, like when I walk in the library, I'll just like pick it up and see if it's interesting. Um, yeah, I just read all over the place, and I kind of think of reading as like Bayesian inference for your knowledge base. So you come into a book or an article with some prior knowledge, and then you read the book, and then based on the data in the book, you update your prior beliefs. And so like over time, you're kind of getting closer to, well, maybe there's not really like one truth, but you're, I guess, becoming less wrong over time. And so reading is kind of this process of, like how can how can you like become less wrong about the world? And that's kind of how I view reading.
Right. Is there any like one particular interesting thing that you learned from your reading?
Oh man, I can't really single out any one thing. I mean, I guess I've written a couple articles on the books I've read. Maybe one of my favorite books is called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and so that's a behavioral economics book, and it just goes through like every single bias that humans have, and like why we don't actually make rational decisions. And I find that very useful, because I like observe in my daily life, like I'm falling prey to the sunk cost fallacy, or like the endowment effect. And like once I see these things, I realize like, oh, that doesn't actually make sense, and then maybe I can try to avoid that in the future. Although I still usually fall prey to my biases. So
Yeah, I love that book actually.
yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah. All right. I think I just have one final question. I mean, it's something that I always ask, but is there anything else that you want to add to this whole conversation?
Yeah, I guess for anyone who's like out there listening and who's like reading blog posts, I would say like just get started, and like find some data you're interested in and try to do some project. And if you're you might make some mistakes along the way, but that's really part of learning. So don't worry about don't don't be like a perfectionist and say, okay, I'm not going to start this project because I can't do it perfectly. You know, you just got to go out and do it, and maybe put it out there in a blog. I found that like, especially in the data science community, people really aren't nasty online. Maybe that's just towards data science. But like if you make a mistake, and someone points it out, then that's just like an opportunity to learn. So I would say don't be worried, about making mistakes, because everyone does. And one thing I like to always keep in mind is that it's easier to act your way into thinking than to think your way into acting. So if you think you want to be a data scientist, you're not just going to keep thinking about it and actually become a data scientist. You got to take these steps and start doing projects, and then eventually over time, you can act your way into being a data scientist. Um,
Wow.
and so and just like don't worry about your lack of credentials. data science is still pretty wide open. I wouldn't say there's any one path that you have to take into the field. So I'm a mechanical engineer, self-taught in data science and programming, and I made my way into the field. So just like, don't worry about, if you don't have the right degree or whatever. As long as you can, learn these skills, then you should be good to, work in a lot of different places. So yeah, I mean, I would say it's a great time to be in data science or learning data science. It's a great field.
Yeah. All right, great. Thank you so much, Will.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for taking the time and talking. Thanks for everything Towards Data Science does. It's a great resource, and I'm glad to write for you guys and now to be on your podcast. So thank you very much.